All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at Genesis 15,
Oh, yeah. Genesis 15,
a pretty important chapter, I'd say, in the Bible.
for sure.
It's all about, well, Abram. Later he becomes Abraham.
Right, right.
And it's about his covenant with God.
Yeah, a pivotal moment for sure.
We've got a couple of sources to guide us along.
Okay.
First off, we've got the King James Version.
Classic.
Can't go wrong with that.
Nope.
And we've also got Matthew Henry's commentary to dig into.
Nice. From 1710, right?
That's the one. It's like having a study buddy from, 300 years ago?
Uh-huh. Something like that.
But really, one of the things that I think makes this chapter so interesting is how it tackles this, the whole idea of faith.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't shy away from how complicated it can be.
No, not at all.
You see, Abram, chosen by God, and yet he still has doubts, like real human doubts.
That's what makes it so relatable, right?
Totally. I mean, God's promised him all these descendants, as many as the stars, but Abram, he doesn't have any kids yet.
Still childless.
It's got to be tough to just blindly accept that promise,
Yeah, I can see that.
Almost like he wants to say to God, okay, I believe you, but how about a little sign, like a progress report or something?
He's looking for some confirmation, for sure.
Definitely. And it's not like his doubt is just hinted at.
No.
He comes right out and says, hey, God, my heir is going to be this guy Eliezer, my servant.
He even names him.
Right. It's almost like he's begging for a sign, like, is this really going to happen, God?
It's a powerful moment.
It really is. And, it makes me wonder.
What's that?
Well, if even Abram, this big time patriarch of faith,
Yeah.
if he can struggle with this stuff, what does that tell us about faith in general?
You're asking, is doubt just a part of the human experience of faith?
Exactly. It's a question that's been around for centuries, right?
Oh, yeah. Theologians, philosophers, they've all wrestled with it.
Some say doubt is necessary, like it pushes you toward a deeper understanding.
Right, like a catalyst.
Others, though, they think true faith means you just gotta believe no matter what.
No wavering.
So what do you think, listener? Where do you fall on that?
It's a good question to ponder.
I gotta say, for me, seeing Abram struggle like this makes him more relatable,
Makes him human.
Totally. He's not just this perfect, distant figure.
Yeah.
He's someone who's going through it, feeling fear, uncertainty, hope.
The whole spectrum of human emotion.
Exactly. And you know what? It's right in the middle of all that, that God decides to make this covenant with Abram.
Oh, yeah. Huge moment.
A formal agreement that's going to shape the future of all his descendants.
A turning point in history.
And it's not just some casual handshake deal, right?
Nope, not at all.
We're talking about a full-on ancient ritual here.
The whole 9 yards.
Loaded with symbolism.
Absolutely.
In Genesis 15, it talks about how they divide all these animals.
Okay.
A heifer, a goat, a ram, even a turtle dove and a pigeon.
Wow. Whole menagerie.
Right. And each one probably meant something specific back then.
I bet.
Like the heifer, maybe that represents fertility.
Oh, interesting. Tying right back into that promise of descendants.
Exactly. It's almost like God speaking Abram's language, addressing his fears directly through this big, dramatic ritual.
Yeah. Using a language that Abram would understand.
And, just imagine being there. The anticipation, all those animals, the weight of the moment.
It must have been quite a sight.
And what's really cool is that Abram isn't just standing there passively.
Oh.
It says he actually drove away birds of prey from the carcasses.
He was protecting it.
Right. He's actively safeguarding this promise, this future that God's laid out for him.
He's taking ownership.
You can feel the urgency there, his determination to protect this pact.
Wow.
But then things take a bit of a turn, literally.
What do you mean?
Well, this deep sleep comes over Abram.
Okay.
And he's surrounded by darkness.
Huh. Sounds ominous.
It feels like something's about to happen, like a storm brewing.
You're right. It's a real shift in tone.
And it sets the scene for this prophecy that's coming next.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
God reveals that Abram's descendants, they're going to face some tough times.
Yeah.
They'll be strangers in a foreign land, enslaved and afflicted for 400 years.
That's a heavy burden to bear.
It really is, and it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
If you were Abram, knowing all that was coming, would you still be on board with this whole covenant thing?
It's a tough question.
I mean, your own descendants, going through all that suffering.
It's a lot to process, even with the promise of deliverance later on.
I know, and it makes you think about, what does it really mean to have faith?
Right. Is it still faith if you know the road ahead is going to be rough?
And what does it mean to accept a blessing that comes at such a high cost for the people who come after you?
Deep questions.
I bet those thoughts were swirling in Abram's mind when he woke up.
Definitely.
And you know what happens next.
What's that?
Right as the sun sets, he sees this crazy vision.
Oh, tell me more.
A smoking furnace.
Whoa, and a burning lamp passing right between those pieces of the covenant.
Wow, that's vivid.
It's like something out of a movie, you know. Fire, light, drama. Got to be a message from God, right?
It has to be.
But what's so cool is this vision, it's open to interpretation.
Really?
So how have people understood this vision throughout history?
Well, some see it as like God's presence right there in the moment.
Like God is literally there.
Moving between those pieces, making the covenant real.
That's intense.
Others, though, they see it more symbolically.
Symbolically how?
Well, like it's a picture of the trials and the deliverance that Abram's descendants are going to go through.
Ah, I see.
The furnace, all smoky, that's the hardship, the fire they got to walk through.
The lamp.
The lamp's God, right there with him, a light in all that darkness.
So it's like the prophecy visualized.
Exactly, the dark and the light all tangled up together.
It's really amazing how much they packed into this one chapter.
It's dense for sure.
And then it doesn't stop there with the symbolism.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Well, the chapter ends with God really laying it all out there.
Laying what out?
The promise of the land.
Right, right.
He tells Abram it's yours, all the way from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River.
Wow, that's a huge chunk of land.
It is, and to really drive it home,
Yeah.
he lists out all the nations that are living there.
Like who's already there?
The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Messing around.
It's like God saying, look, I'm not talking about some tiny little plot here. This is the real deal, a land overflowing with good stuff.
A land flowing with milk and honey, as they say.
Exactly. This is your inheritance, Abram.
And, you know, listing all those nations,
Yeah.
it really shows how big this promise is.
You're right. It's not just about Abram himself anymore.
It's about building a whole nation.
A whole people who inherit the land and the covenant too.
Wow.
Okay, so we've got all this story of Abram wrestling with doubt, this covenant with all its rituals and sacrifices, a prophecy full of hardship but also ultimate victory, and this huge promise of land.
A lot going on for sure.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
Why should we care?
The age-old question.
What does it mean for us today, thousands of years later?
That's the key, isn't it? Finding the relevance.
Exactly. So what do you think? Any takeaways that still hit home?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
Well, first off, it reminds us that faith, it's a journey.
Not just a destination.
Right. You don't just arrive at faith and that's it.
It's a process.
Even Abram, the father of faith, he had his doubts, his moments of uncertainty.
He questioned God. He asked for reassurance.
And in the end, he had to trust in a promise that he wouldn't even see fulfilled in his own lifetime.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is.
It makes faith seem more, human.
More relatable.
Yeah, like it's okay to not have it all figured out.
To wrestle with the unknown.
What matters is that we keep searching, keep trusting, even when we're not sure what's ahead.
I like that.
And another thing, this whole idea of covenants, they were a big deal.
Oh, yeah, serious business.
And here we see God making this formal agreement with Abram, a binding promise that's going to affect generations to come.
It speaks to God's faithfulness, his commitment to keeping his word.
Even when we might waver.
Right, even when our own faith gets shaky.
And it's not just some empty promise either.
What do you mean?
There are real sacrifices involved.
Right, we see it with the animals.
And with the prophecy, the hardship that Abram's descendants are going to face.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
It makes you think, are we willing to make sacrifices for what we believe in?
Tough question.
Are we willing to face hard times, knowing that it might lead to something better down the line?
For ourselves or for future generations.
It's a powerful concept.
You've hit on something really important.
And at the end of the day, I think this story is all about hope. Yeah, even when things look dark and uncertain, God's promises are still there.
Like a light in the darkness.
Exactly. The prophecy of deliverance, the vision of the burning lamp, the fact that the covenant will eventually be fulfilled, it all points to a future full of possibility.
And redemption.
Right. It's a reminder that even when we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel,
God's still working.
guiding us toward his purpose.
And that purpose, it's often bigger and more amazing than we can even imagine.
So we've dug into the story of Abram's covenant, the challenges, the promises, what it all means.
It's a pretty incredible chapter.
But I keep coming back to this one question.
What's that?
Knowing what his descendants were going to go through, all those years of slavery and struggle, Why do you think Abram said yes to this covenant?
You're asking what made him accept such a huge responsibility.
Especially knowing the pain it would bring to his family line.
It really gets at the heart of faith, doesn't it?
Trusting God, even when you can't see what's coming.
Trusting in the unseen.
I think it's something we can all relate to in some way.
How so?
We all have those moments where you gotta make tough choices, believe in something bigger than ourselves, even when we don't know the outcome.
It's about surrendering to something beyond our own understanding.
Something that goes beyond the struggles and challenges we face right now.
I think that's the real power of Genesis 15.
It's a story about faith, about sacrifice, about hope, a story that still matters today.
Thousands of years later.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm left with this sense of, I don't know, awe
Oh.
at the power of faith, the mystery of these covenants, the hope that shines through even the darkest prophecies.
It's powerful stuff.
And maybe, just maybe, it gives us a new perspective on our own place in all of this.
Our own role in God's story.
Realizing that we're all part of something bigger, even if we don't always understand it.
That's a beautiful thought.
We're invited to embrace the journey, to walk by faith, not by sight, and to trust that even when we can't see where we're going, God's leading us towards something amazing.
To something extraordinary.
So what do you say? Are you ready for part 3?
Let's dive in.
It really makes you think, what would it take for me to do that? You know?
To accept hardship for my kids and grandkids down the line.
Yeah, for a promise that I might not even live to see happen, it's a lot.
It is. If someone came to me today and said, hey, I got this great plan, but it involves like centuries of hardship for your descendants, I'd have some questions.
Right. At least a few.
More than a few,
I
probably.
think, can I get this in writing?
Uh-huh, exactly.
But Abram, he just seems to jump right in.
Head first.
What do you think gave him that kind of trust?
Well, maybe it was that vision.
Smoking furnace and the burning lamp.
Yeah, maybe seeing that so powerful, so real, that made it click for him.
Like, okay, I can do this.
Gave him the courage to say yes, even knowing what was coming.
It's like God knew just what Abram needed to see. That visual reminder that even when things are tough, he's still there.
Guiding the way.
And don't forget, this is way before the Bible as we know it.
Oh yeah, ancient times.
So this story, this vision, it's like a foundation.
For everything that comes after.
It shaped how people understood God for centuries.
It's mind-blowing, the impact of this one chapter.
It really is.
And even though we might not have covenants with smoking furnaces and promised lands these days,
Right.
the heart of Genesis 15, it still matters.
What do you mean?
Well, we all have those moments when we got to trust in something bigger than ourselves.
Have faith.
Even when it's dark, believe there's a light out there somewhere.
It's about letting go of control, trusting that something incredible is happening, even if we don't get it.
It's a surrender.
So, listener, maybe today you'll come across your own smoking furnace.
Your own moment of doubt.
Remember Abram.
His courage.
And maybe you'll find the strength to take that leap of faith.
Your own leap.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Genesis 15.
We covered a lot of ground.
The nature of faith, those ancient covenants, the power of hope.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep.
There's always more to discover.
Until next time.